Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We will call the Frontenac County Council meeting for Wednesday, May 17th, 2023 to order.
Moved by Councillor Greenwood Spears, seconded by Deputy Warden Smith, resolved that the addendum for the May 17th, 2023 meeting of the Council of the County of Frontenac be approved.
Any comments on the agenda? None. All in favor? Carry. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? None. Adoption of the minutes.
So the minutes of April 19th, 2023, moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Gowdy, resolved that the minutes of the regular council meeting held April 19th, 2023 be adopted.
Is there any comments or questions on the minutes? All in favor? Carry.
Moved by Councillor Leonard, seconded by Councillor Fowler, resolved that the minutes of the special council meeting held April 26th, 2023 be adopted.
Any comments or questions? All in favor? Carry.
Moved by Councillor Lichty, seconded by Councillor Greenwood Spears, resolved that the minutes of the special council meeting held May 10th, 2023 be adopted.
Comments, questions? All in favor? Carry. My job here is done.
Moved by Deputy Warden Smith, seconded by Councillor Saunders, that council adjourn and meet as committee of the whole with the Deputy Warden in the chair.
All in favor? Carry. Yes.
All right, our next item is the CAO. Kelly Pender is going to give us his monthly briefing.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. This is our report for May the 17th, 2023. And as usual, I'll highlight a couple of items off of each page, but available to answer questions. And if we can't answer, we'll get back to you as soon as possible. So in terms of the schedule, next slide, please. Several meetings, Warden Caucus related, but I think most particularly for this group, we continue to meet with regards to long-term care. The issues continue to be staffing and regulations and how the province is implementing those. So the Wardens Caucus will be reviewing those at their July meeting in preparation for meeting with the minister at AMO. We're also having the 2019 service review for Eastern Ontario for paramedics. The final report was presented to the caucus on Thursday last week in Peterborough, and we'll be bringing a summary report back to council probably at the June meeting. But that again will form a large part of what we're be presenting to AMO. At a high level, I think it's safe to say that activity across Eastern Ontario continues to be increasing for paramedics. We are an aging society. A number of pressures, most particularly offload delays in hospitals, continue to gum up the system, for lack of a better word. It's estimated that about $17 million is spent on offload delays just in Eastern Ontario with the 13 services. And of that, 50% of that would be paid for by municipalities. So it is a significant issue, but not to downplay the fact that, you know, like everybody else, hospitals are having a hard time staffing emergency rooms. But there are things that the province can be doing, and our working group will be working through the recommendations and providing those to the minister at AMO. Next slide, please. So the Eastern Ontario Leadership council board meeting was on May the 4th. And most of the major projects have wrapped up, including labor market initiative using artificial intelligence. And that has been handed over to the province as a completed project. The one window permitting process in partnership with Transnomus and council. We do have a membership with Municipal 511, which is available to all public works departments to input their road closures throughout their municipality. And your public works directors are aware of that and use it on a regular basis. So it's an extension of that that will allow a contractor or construction company to receive permits. So for example, if you're traveling from Cobourg to Chalk River, you'd be going through some 20 municipalities. So instead of getting 20 different permits for an oversized load, you could log on to this system and get one permit. So it's past the pilot stage. It's being handed over again to the province as part of the implementation. Just about every county except for Hastings and Frontenac, which do not have roads departments, is currently using the system for permitting. So you may want your public works staff to be looking at that if you do issue permits for oversized loads or closed bridges or those kinds of things. So two advantages to that. One is, of course, from the perspective of the carrier who can receive a permit and just does it in one location. And all of the financial stuff takes care of itself in the background, and your municipality gets paid, obviously saving a lot of time. Perhaps more important is that for the most part, that probably wasn't happening in the past because it was a cumbersome process. So there were trucks going down, routes that weren't designed for trucks, getting stuck on bridges or down old cottage roads because that GPS said that was the shortest route. So this will help both with the routing and with the permitting. So kudos to the Leadership Council that was led by Stormont Dundas and Glengarry, and will soon be implemented across Ontario in partnership with Transnomus. We're a good Eastern Ontario company. Next slide, please.
Technical difficulties. I won't sing for you. You'll be very pleased about that.
So the first point on the AMO communications is the only one I'm going to touch on because that's about conservation authorities, and there is a motion on today's agenda about the role of conservation authorities in the planning process. So in Frontenac, we do about 195 applications per year that require comment by the conservation authorities for natural heritage features. South Frontenac put together a motion which has been circulated to the 4 county townships, is on today's agenda. And we passed it last month. And was approved by the Wardens Caucus on Thursday. The point being that, we don't have the staff to properly respond to those issues. The information and reports rests with the conservation authorities, and, it's going to be a significant burden on applicants having to pay for a consultant to do the work. North Frontenac has gone out and sought some quotes from different firms to do the natural heritage consultation. So whereas it used to cost us about $500 per application, it's going to be about $2,000 per application. And that's if they don't have to do a site visit. So on top of that would be a site visit if it's required. So it's going to be a significant impact on applicants because they'll be paying the freight.
Ron?
Just a point of clarification, that motion is on the county's agenda today. The other lower tiers have already had the motion and they've approved it. So has the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus.
So it really makes sense, and you know, the position that we took with the MPP for Frontenac, John Jordan, a month or so ago, was that, you know, what works in Toronto doesn't necessarily work in rural Ontario, that we are different. Frontenac has 4 different conservation authorities, and of course, Frontenac Islands is not part of any of them, but still has the same obligations. So they've removed the ability of conservation authorities to comment, but haven't adjusted at all the timelines or the requirement to comment on natural heritage features. So if we, sorry. Ta-da. Thank you. So if we could go to the first one with the administrative office background, one more, there we go. So we will have another meeting next Tuesday, but we had a special council meeting 2 weeks ago to look at how we deal with the never-ending bottomless hole. We've been advised that the contractor will be on site. We lost about 5 or 6 days due to the significant rain of a couple of weeks ago, so we should have an answer in the next day or two about what we will find in the hole where the council chambers is going to be. We did authorize the increased engineering required for a potential 3rd floor, so we will be dealing with that. When we were there last Tuesday, significant progress has been made. Finishing touches are being completed for the Conservation Authority side. They were putting down the flooring. Most of the painting had been done. The ceiling was in and is looking really good. We have a small team, Conservation Authority and ourselves, looking at furniture, and Brianna is leading that from our side, along with Donna Campbell from the Conservation Authority, and they'll be reporting back as part of that as well. They were at one contractor yesterday and have another one, I believe, on Friday. So we're making good progress all around, and we'll report back to council as soon as we know about the footings.
Ron?
Is there an opportunity to fence it off, that if conservation's total area is all done, that they could move, or do they have to wait till when we do, which is 2024?
Yeah, there is an opportunity, and when I talked to Katrina last Tuesday, she's going to bring it back to her group. It would be nice if we all moved in at the same time, but they're not under any pressure to move in either, because they've still got their own facility, but there is that opportunity, and the contractor is aware of that.
Just wanted to check if there's opportunity to get back to the AMO communications. I actually did have some questions
Oh, sure.
on some of that before we got too deep into the woods here. One of them is regarding the Ontario Community Environment Fund application for transfer of payment, and the due date is by May 30th. Could you explain further? And that is this council or Frontenac Islands Council able to ask for funds
It would be through your township,
through the township?
correct?
Okay. And also for some of the registrations that were mentioned for AMO, are the expenses covered for that? There's conflict resolution and human rights, equity, and things of that nature. Is that covered? through
Yes,
the county?
if you register, if you have Brianna register and it's available within your $4,000, you are eligible to have it paid for by the county.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. One more. So ignoring for a moment that we've had a pandemic, we had a summer student a year ago who began the development of an app for the Howe Island Ferry. So as part of our contract with MTO, there are a number of statistics that we're required to report to MTO on. And previously it was entirely manual. So what, and it was Kevin before this and what Kirsty has completed is completely automating that process using an iPad so that the information is immediately downloaded and we're not manually inputting on any given day. We might have 30 to 40 trips across and all this data used to be manually entered. So big kudos to the GIS department and what they've helped us do through the continuous improvement program, but also to the frontline staff. So they've gone from pen and paper and a clipboard to an iPad, but it's saving a significant amount of time in the background. And we should be able to provide more regular updates to county council in terms of ridership. So next slide, please. The new digital solution, as I said, was Kirsty Hutchison, began by Kevin, our summer student. And we've also taken a lot of the how-to documents and created a guide process that's on the iPad so they can immediately access it. So the results more timely, more accurate data collection. It's entered once, it's point and click. There's no trying to translate people's handwriting, which I've done on occasion when we've taken deep dives on this information. So less manual entry, but a big time savings at the end, because at the end of the month, you'd have 30 pages of data with 30 to 40 trips to enter into the data. And then we provide that to MTO. Next slide, please.
Yeah, is there a spot on there where they have to deal with fees, or is that just automatic what the vehicle is?
Fees are collected on the deck or through the Honk app. So you can pay through the app or you can pay on the deck. The person, over my head, the app is actually in the wheelhouse, Rob. So they're not.
So through the deputy warden, there are two apps. One app is controlled at the wheelhouse level. That is the one that we track as what vehicles, and then the fees collection is separate component on the app that's run out of the deck house.
Joe, could you share your mic with Rob?
So if you look on screen here, Councillor Fowler, it automates that process as well, but it's two separate parts to the equation. So at the end of the day, it'd be the number of trips, number of seasons passes, number of people that use the Honk app, which is the same app that the city of Kingston uses. Yellow tickets, blue tickets, and pink tickets. So that's all tabulated as well.
Judy?
So the figure that we're looking at, for example, that has the first cyclist tickets of 600 or 467. Is that for the all of last year of 2022, or is that for this month?
That's a sample. I'm getting to the quarterly report in a couple slides.
All right, thank you.
Next slide, please. So this is just a visual. So we've taken the piece of paper that you saw and turned it into just a point and click. Next slide, please. That's just the summary, the sample. Next one, please. Next one, please. So the baiting testing is now complete as of late 2022, has been in use since beginning of January 2023. And Christy's been working with the staff to take the bugs out, but our aim is to provide quarterly reports to council to assist with decision making. Next slide, please. So this is the first quarter, and we'll get to April in a moment. Didn't want to confuse things, but so small vehicles were down slightly through the first quarter compared to the year before. Large vehicles were down. Bikes were up. I don't know who was biking to Howe Island in January, but I'm sure the weather was lovely. Passengers were down. Left by vehicles were 104 or up by 104. But the majority of the vehicles left behind were in January due to dock and vessel repair issues. And the voyages are down 257 trips. So the beauty of this is that as we build data, we'll be able to provide more comparisons. So comparing 1 year over 1 year is interesting, but it's subject to weather, subject to dry dock issues. So it's going to be looking at trends. So three to 4 years from now, you'll have more trending data to be able to
Bill?
make decisions.
Through you, Deputy Warden, could you, CO, could you explain the vehicles left behind? And the reason I'm asking is because capacity on that ferry is an issue. And I don't know if this is a data point that we can use to sort of build a case in terms of capacity.
Yeah, so the vehicles left behind, so it is down from 3 lanes to 2 lanes. So if the vessel gets full, then those vehicles are left behind and they'll be picked up on the next trip. So in 2023, there were 545. So essentially, let's call it 100 more vehicles were left behind in that 3-month period than the 3-month period the year before. But at the same time, the vehicle was, or the vessel was out for repairs a fair bit, so there would be more. So on balance, slightly more, but it may have been offset by vehicle and dock repair or vessel and dock repairs.
Follow-up question if I could. So is the count taken on the mainland side, ferry side, or both?
Go ahead, Rob.
So through the deputy warden, it's taken on both sides. The app calculates you do like from mainland and then you redo from island over.
Next slide, please. So because we're a month behind getting this to you, we separated April out by itself. So you can see the number of vehicles left behind were 746, which was more than were in the first quarter. But at the same time, commencing April the 19th, the township ferry was out of service. So nobody was using the foot ferry. Everybody was going to the other ferry.
The issue of the ferry being out of service seems to have a major impact on vehicles left and whatever, and rightly so. Does this app somehow track when the ferry is out of service as well?
Rob keeps track of that separately. It's not on the app. It's actually one of the key performance indicators that Kevin will be providing a report on probably the June or July meeting as we track the uptime for the ferry.
Okay, so while I'm reading this, it'd be really nice to be able to compare vehicles left behind, you know, on the various days and whether the ferry ran half the time or didn't run at all or whatever.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So just some notes. Next slide, please. Quarterly reports will become more useful as we gather more data, obviously, and month over month or quarter over quarter comparisons can be deceiving because of weather, service interruptions, status of the township ferry, and we affect the township ferry affects us, obviously. So, and just a reminder that, you know, we don't control, we make the vessel go back and forth. It's MTO's responsibility to keep the vessel in good repair, and everything from, you know, a minor outage, electronics issue on the vessel or a significant dock repair is the responsibility of MTO. And I'd just like to again thank the frontline staff who have gone through a fairly significant change in process and have adapted rather well.
Ron, and then Judy.
I assume Howe Island would be different than Wolf Island, but are some of these vehicles left behind because it's easier to commute with somebody? I know it's not quite the same as Wolf Island. You end up downtown, and if you're working at the hospital, it's no big deal. But do they do that there on Howe Island as well? I'm just wondering for those numbers. That's all. I'm just curious.
Let me answer that. So let me add to the CEO's comments about the remarkable work that the ferry staff have done during this period where the township ferry was out of service for its out of water 5-year annual or whatever inspection. So ferry staff did a remarkable job. In addition to that, a lot of residents chose to park a car on the other side and then walk onto the ferry or use a carpool. So they everybody's kind of doing their part to kind of reduce the overall traffic. I don't believe that ask the experts on this. I don't believe that the cars left behind count would have included cars that were parked over in a separate parking lot as people walked on up, but about the expert.
And maybe Rob can answer, have walk-ons increased, Rob, or?
So through the deputy warden, the walk-ons are not calculated at the county ferry. The left behinds are only the vehicles that are in line waiting for the ferry.
Judy.
Okay, I think that there actually is a value in the month over month report in that it would indicate how many hours or even days that the ferry might not be running. And I think that that has a tremendous impact that we should be aware of, and that when the down times are and how many reduced trips there are out of that. Because I do see that there's a significant number of reduced trips, 257, I think I saw. And I suspect that they were almost entirely related to the ferry being out of service, and that's why. And that's so giving us a better feel and that of when we're having the most downtime would be very helpful, I think.
Yeah, and we, as I said, we do report that annually as part of our 78 key performance indicators report to council. But Rob and Christian, I'll put our heads together and see how we could report that as part of the Q report as well. Next slide, please. So the council strategic planning exercise, the surveys closed last week. So as of May the 15th, the surveys are done. As one of the people in that aging demographic, we've done our part to contribute to the survey, and thank you to everybody that has contributed to the survey, and in particular Frontenac Island's contribution was significant. The consultants will be bringing back a report at the July meeting, I'm assuming. June meeting. Okay. Next one, please. So the strategic planning exercise, senior staff at the county, the township, and the city of Kingston have been interviewed one-on-one as part of that process. And they've met with each of your councils. The draft strategic plan be presented by Explorer Solutions. Jason, who was here a couple months back in June, and the final report and submission presented we're anticipating in July. Next slide, please. So human resources update, 183 recruitments to date. Things have slowed down a little bit on the recruitment front, but still extremely busy. 13 part-time paramedics have been hired and been through the orientation process. On Monday, we had our group orientation process, and we had a significant number of PSWs, also some ferry staff, and 13 paramedics. So it's been busy. 3 RPNs and 6 PSWs hired in the last month, and our summer student contingent for planning, economic development, and GIS are also on board. They had their first day with the county on May the 5th, first Monday in May. So we have finalized the collective agreements for CUPE and OPSU, CUPE 109 being the ferry workers, and OPSU being the paramedics, and CUPE 2290 is scheduled for interest arbitration, but we have not heard back from them. We have one ongoing investigation and had an arbitration hearing on May the 8th. Our HRIS system that we receive funding from the province for and co-tendered with Leeds and Grenville, the implementation is beginning to wrap up, although there are still some transition headaches. Currently doing the training, skills, education, and certification requirements that are required for paramedics and for long-term care, and will help us with some of the training requirements. The onboarding is in production and being set up, and the document management and message panel is being set up, as well as the performance management and succession management sections, which remain in testing but should be rolled out soon. Big kudos to Candace Keller, who is our senior HR generalist that's been doing the implementation and doing yeoman work, along with our finance staff, because the two are connected. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So the staffing, we've implemented the new 12-hour resource starting April the 10th with 4 new full-time paramedics. And we began the onboarding process for the 13 new part-time paramedics on May the 15th. As I said, they attended the county orientation on Monday. The community paramedicine knowledge exchange and the OPAC spring meetings are continuing, as well as our CMEs for our certification program for our paramedics, which is required under the act and is conducted through the medical officer. Next slide, please. Primary care paramedic Michael Pash retires today, and Michael's been with us for more than 30 years, and we congratulate Michael. He was a recipient of the Award of Excellence in 2022 and has served Frontenac and Kingston admirably over the last 30 years. So we wish Michael all the best in his retirement. Next slide, please. Our social media and engagement and communications exercise or ongoing work, stable engagement across all channels in April with about 49,000 recorded actions across all of our media channels. And the top story was on April the 11th was Percy Vine signing off for the last time. And Percy again retired after 38 years of service. And Percy was a bit of a staple in the paramedic world and a fine gentleman to boot. And we wish Percy well in his retirement as well. Next one, please. Oops, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Judy.
Thank you. Just because we're talking about communication, the first motion that I put in as a new counselor was referred to the accessibility committee, but it was based on asking that we get our communication, sending a fax or an email to radio, TV, et cetera, and that when there's an urgent situation such as a ferry being off or down for maintenance and that, and can we get a report at some point on that? To
Yeah,
find out where it is?
the committee reported back 2 or 3 months ago. We can dig it up and send it to you. How's that? The accessibility committee, it was your motion referred it to the accessibility committee who have provided comment and will, yeah. They made no recommendation to change the current process. They felt it was sufficient.
Oh, okay, then I'll be resubmitting that to wherever I can get it because it still is an issue. We, as you know, we had an issue with the Wolf Islander 3 ferry, which this county does not look after as a whole. However, getting the message out by radio and TV is crucial for tourism especially, and it will impact Howe Island in different times because Twitter just doesn't cut it when they're coming from Toronto.
Next slide, please. So the planning department update, the inaugural meeting of the committee took place on the 29th and the next meeting was scheduled for May the 3rd. Sorry about that. That should say the last meeting was on May the 3rd. The draft provincial policy statements have been presented by the province and there is a comment period. Should you feel that comments are warranted. And planning application fees update, South Frontenac has held a public meeting. We've also met with North and Central. I'm not sure that we've met with the islands yet to review the planning fees, but both planning staff at the township here in South Frontenac and the county have been cooperating on providing some best practice advice to council. Next slide, please. While applications are a little bit down from pandemic highs, there is still considerable interest in planning applications and lots of pre-consultation continuing. And as always, spring brings in more applications. So we expect that those numbers will continue to rise.
Go ahead.
It was just looking at North Frontenac, one application. I think because it is spring, this this thing isn't quite accurate right now. There should be more people.
4 applications.
Oh, sorry, 4. I'm sorry. I looked at Frontenac.
So those are just applications brought forward. So there's all kinds of pre-consultation ongoing throughout that. General rule of thumb, 10 pre-consultations will result in 4 or 5 applications, which will result in 2 or 3 building permits. So we report to council in terms of the number of formal applications brought forward.
Okay, thank you.
And finally, economic development and certainly, as we turn to spring and tourist season, we wish all of the seasonal businesses in Frontenac all the best for the upcoming tourism season, and both Richard and Debbie have been extremely busy with events and meeting with businesses, as well as working on the trail. We are looking for more farm participants for the open farms. It has changed up, and Richard has reported on that. So if you know of a farmer that would like to participate, have them get in touch through the Engage Frontenac or directly through Richard or Debbie. The Tourism Experience Development Workshop, again, we're trying to build on the Frontenac brand and awareness of tourism opportunities, and then growing the opportunity to work together. So on June the 14th from 9 till 1 at the Verona Lions Hall, we will be doing a tourism experience development workshop. And thank you to Maple Ridge Farms and MT Adventures for sharing some of their business case with the community. So with that,
Okay.
Deputy
Thank
Warden,
you,
if there are any
Kelly.
questions?
Any further questions or comments on any of the briefing notes? Okay, there's none. We will move on in the agenda then. There is no unfinished business, consent reports, none. So we are at Committee of Management of Fairmont Home.
Moved by Councillor Gowdy, seconded by Councillor Leonard, that Committee of the Whole adjourn and meet as Committee of Management of Fairmount Home with the Deputy Warden in the chair.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. So there's the resident report and annual satisfaction survey of 2022. Any comments on that? Fred, go ahead. Or sorry, Jerry. Sorry.
Sorry. I did read this. I thought it was. Grandma only did a great job. I just had one question about what the stage, where I live in the appendix. And I'm looking down when I see it. Grandma only-
Jerry, your mic, put your mic on.
So I'm going through Appendix A and I noticed the results are all in percentages. So how are those percentages arrived at? What do they mean to me, other than they look really good? I guess that's all really is important, but I still would like to know what's behind it.
So the percentages are just the respondent's selection of their answer to the question. I
So
mean,
they had a specific question and it was yes or no. And if they said yes, that would, that's good.
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
On that note, there were, overall was a great report and that, but there was one particular area and it reflected itself consistently in two questions, and that was regarding religious or ethnic or cultural values, and that where we've gone down 8% in that and to 56% rating in 2022. And prior to that, the home respects my loved one's spiritual or cultural values. It went down 3% overall to 69. I'm just wondering, are we short ministers, or has there been something significant that went on that, because at this point in their life, that's a pretty high need, and that is spiritual.
Susan?
Yes, our prior pastor actually passed away early in the year and was just recently replaced in the last month and a half. So yes, we are on track with a new pastor, and so that would be reflected in the responses for this year.
All right, nothing else. The next report is the quarterly activity. Any comments on that report? Seeing none, we have a motion.
Moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Warden Vandewalle, that the Committee of Management of Fairmount Home adjourn and revert back to Committee of the Whole.
All those in favor? Carried. All right, now we have a staff briefing. And we have Dimitri, our community planner. He's going to talk about the Provincial Policy Statement, Planning Act Bill 97.
Thanks, Deputy Warden. Yeah, it looks like the province has thrown some more changes at us regarding the planning framework in Ontario. I don't have a formal presentation, but We did prepare a report, and I'm just going to speak to some of the contents of that report as an overview, and then you'll obviously have opportunity to ask me some questions and have a discussion regarding what these changes may mean for the county as well as for your townships as well. So there are two changes that have been brought forward on April 6th, primarily one with amendments to the provincial policy statement. It's being renamed to the provincial planning statement, although the context or the content of the policy statement and the structure is going to be more or less the same with just some policy changes. The second one are changes to the Planning Act through Bill 97, and both of these are going to be used to support the provincial initiatives towards attempting to build more housing within the province. So I'm going to first talk about the changes to the PPS first, and then we'll move on to Bill 97. The way that we see it is that a majority of these changes are geared more towards larger, faster growing urban municipalities with municipal services. So the impact of the PPS changes are going to be limited in the county. However, there are a few significant changes that may impact some of our townships. So just as a quick overview, the provincial policy statement is a background document of planning interest that the province issues, that every township official plan, their zoning bylaw, and any planning decision made by any township needs to conform to. So any decision we make at the planning level, at the municipal level, needs to be consistent with the provincial policy statement. The first change that will have an impact on the township of South Frontenac and the township of Frontenac Islands is related to lot creation in prime agricultural areas. So the current PPS does not permit any type of residential severances within prime agricultural areas. Typically, the only way that you can create new residential lots within prime ag areas are if you are creating more agricultural land, so a minimum of lot size of about 50 or so acres. The new provincial policy statement will now permit up to 3 new residential parcels from an existing agricultural parcels if certain criteria are met. Now, these criteria on the surface look like they're easy to interpret and easy to understand. However, when you actually dig deeper into the definitions and the intent of the provincial policy statement, there are a lot of questions that come up regarding the implementation of these policies. In short, these policies are not going to allow residential lot creation on every single lot within the agricultural area. The report does outline some of the criteria. Some of this criteria includes that the lot that's proposed to be severed must be currently used for agriculture. Unfortunately, the PPS does not define what agriculture is, so we'll have to figure that one out. The other criteria is also related to where that agricultural parcel is located, specifically that it has to be adjacent to lower priority agricultural lands. Both adjacent and lower priority agricultural lands are also not defined in the PPS. So you can use common English, I guess, to figure out what those definition means. But there are more questions, I think, than answers regarding the current criteria that's been put forward by the province. This is something that our county, as well as the township of South Frontenac, as well as adjacent municipalities and more rural municipalities across the province are currently looking into. And one of the recommended responses to the provincial policy statement that's included in this report is seeking exactly that. We're basically asking for more information from the province on the implementation of these policies. This is important because in addition to coming out with these new rules regarding lot creation, the province has also said within the provincial policy statement that municipalities are not allowed to create rules within their official plans or zoning bylaws that are more restrictive than what the PPS states. So there's going to be some conflict as far as the implementation of this. In any case, there's going to be a little bit more work required on the applicant's side to demonstrate that the proposed residential lot creation within the prime agricultural area meets that criteria.
Okay, Ron, you have a comment?
Well, when I was reading it, well, I'm sure you are all the same, somewhat confused on some of the language. But, and it says in here, a new lot must be limited to a minimum size. Is that the minimum size what your municipality requires? Or is that the minimum size of what the province says it is?
So that's a very good question, and that's one of the questions that I think has been brought forward by our partners in other jurisdictions. The way that the criteria currently reads is that the lot must be limited to the minimum size needed to accommodate the residential use while ensuring appropriate sewage and water services. So basically, as an applicant, you have to demonstrate that you could fit a standard size home, let's say 3 bedrooms on the property, a septic system, a well that all meets the setbacks in the zoning bylaw as well as the building code. And you have to limit that new lot to that specific size so that you're not taking more than the necessary amount of land out of agricultural production. What does this translate to in the real world? Probably like about an acre to 2 acres per residential lot.
So some of the argument for South Frontenac was we went to 2-acre lots because if you needed an alternative septic field at one time, that's why you needed 2 acres. I think if your septic field fails, they're not going to let you leave it there anyway. So they're going to dig the whole thing out and start over anyway. So some of the 2 acres are nice if you have a neighbor. But I just wondering now if that rationale makes sense along with we're looking at different septic
System.
processes. The other one that I thought was, it says primarily used for agriculture. I have, South Frontenac has also identified their prime A. We don't have a problem with that. But this is more generic to say, well, if it was primarily used for agriculture, well, that could be class 4, could be class 5 at that point. So now are we eliminating them too? Because then I think we're really in trouble with our new OP to boot.
I think in any case, if you've got a class 4 lot that's located within an identified prime agricultural area, it still has the same protections as a class 1 and 2 and 3, at least from my experience. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like on the ground in South Frontenac per se. I think that'll be a better question answered by South Frontenac staff because they're more familiar with those policies and those provisions. But I mean, I think the question regarding the use of primarily used for agriculture, what does primarily used mean? What does agriculture mean? Because those aren't really defined by the province. Like, are we going to be looking at tax records? Like, what are we going to be looking for to make sure that this policy is?
That language, though, it could basically wipe out all of our getting a lot on any agriculture.
Judy and then Fred.
On that point regarding water setback, I believe we had a 500-foot setback from water in order for protection of source of water for buildings and permits of that nature.
The standard setback is 30 meters or about 100 feet from the edge of the high water mark of any water body.
Okay.
So in this context, water services specifically relates to well, like if you have a well on your property.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Regarding building on lots, like if I buy a 50-acre lot, am I restricted to building a home on only 2 acres? And where does it go on that 50-acre parcel? If it's prime.
If it's prime I mean, you're not necessarily, unless the zoning bylaw has specific provisions related to where a residential structure should be located. I'm not aware of those types of provisions, but if you bought a 50-acre land in the prime agricultural area and it doesn't have a house on it yet, you can pretty much build a house anywhere that's practical on it for you. I mean, typically, if you're a farmer, you don't want the new building to be dividing the land in such a way that it's going to make it difficult for you to harvest or use your equipment or maintain the laneway, for example. So I don't think these policies are going to really restrict where buildings are going to go on existing lots, but it will have an impact on where new barns are going to go should new residential uses be established on lands that used to be prime agricultural land.
But if I'm not a farmer, I'm not going to use the land for farming. Does that cause a problem?
it doesn't necessarily cause a problem, and this is, I mean, I think this is a bigger issue regarding prime agricultural land. You can't force people to farm on agricultural land, and I mean, we see that in the GTA a lot, where people buy large tracts of land and then they never use it for agriculture, just use it as a large piece of property.
Judy?
Just to me, it's a waste of good agriculture.
I mean, there's only a finite amount of agricultural land, and to not use it to its maximum potential, I think is a shame.
Okay, and just going back to where I got turned around, that it's on page 9. Maybe you can just clarify in that. It says the county official plan generally defines waterfront areas as all lands extending inland 150 meters, 500 feet from the ordinary high water mark of any lake, river, or waterway. This generally boundary intended to recognize that development within this area may have an impact on the lake quality, and those impacts may be needed to be considered in any development within the boundary. Most of the provisions in this ensure that the quality of water bodies and character of the water is protected in the long term. So that's where I was thinking,
I see.
okay, could you explain that to me?
Sure, yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that refers to the designation areas, agricultural areas and waterfront areas. The waterfront areas are usually a little bit more restrictive in what can take place on them because of the sensitivity associated with development near the shoreline. So when you are looking at development within 150 meters or 500 feet of a water body, a different subset of policies applies to that area. So this here is really in the context of permitting more residential uses within the waterfront area, which is what the province looks like it's heading towards in terms of more additional residential uses. But we just want to make sure that if more residential uses are permitted or dwellings are permitted in the waterfront area, that the province considers that municipalities like ours have worked with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks to come up with these policies that are more sustainable for the health of the water body, while at the same time ensuring that the economy is supported through development of the shoreline.
Okay, and just back to you. So the piece of land does not actually have to be on the water. It could be 500 meters back without having waterfront property, could be considered a waterfront area.
Yeah, 500 feet, yes, but it is, you can have an inland parcel that is within 500 feet of the water that is considered to be located within the waterfront area as far as long in the context of the township official plan.
Okay, I'm going to suggest that we move along because this is a long report.
The other sections are going to be much quicker. So I think I'll just move on from prime ag areas. I mean, I think what we're really asking, I'm just going to touch on the appendix of the report, and that's regarding the recommended comments that we would like to submit to the environmental registry of Ontario, which is seeking comments for this type of matter. And what we're really basically saying in those comments is that agriculture is very important to the economy of Frontenac County, and when we're making these decisions, we have to make sure that we're able to implement the policies of the PPS, and we need more clarification on those policies that are being proposed. So in terms of the second change is related to employment lands. This primarily will be of interest to the Township of South Frontenac. The Township of South Frontenac is the only municipality that defines employment areas within their draft official plan. The province has revised the wording to specifically prohibit residential, commercial, retail, and office uses that are not associated directly with the primary employment use that's located within that employment area. And that's going to have, that may have an impact with respect to South Frontenac's draft OP, simply because it may not provide enough flexibility for a more rural municipality to plan for their employment lands. the way that I see it is that these policies are drafted for, very heavy industry. Whereas more rural townships will have lands that are more diverse than what the province is intending with these changes.
Judy, would that impact a building that has commercial and light industry on the ground floor and may want to put residential above it?
Yes. I mean, I think the rules is the way they are now. If you have light industry, you still have to jump through some hoops to put residential above it. But I think what this will, the way that the word is written, the way that the policy is now written, what it may prevent is that, sometimes if you are in a business park, for example, in employment lands, they'll have like the odd restaurant, or they'll have like an odd office use adjacent to more heavy or medium industrial uses. To me, that is what's going to be prevented by these new employment land policies. So I think it's quite significant in the context of South Frontenac, where you want more diversity in your identified employment areas. There's also been changes to housing and residential developments. So as far as affordable housing, the new PPS has removed references to affordable housing, and now they reference the term housing that is affordable to low and moderate income households. So what this signals is more of a shift to align the policies with other policies that the province has put in place regarding identifying affordable housing based on the market value of the surrounding area rather than the income of the individual. So we still don't know how affordable housing is going to be defined in the new PPS, but that is something that I think is important to highlight. Just going back to the law creation prime ag lands again, regarding housing, each new lot that's now permitted to be created in the prime agricultural area can have a total of 3 dwelling units on it. So that's 1 principal unit, 1 attached dwelling unit, so like an in-law suite or a basement apartment, and then a third in an ancillary or a detached building on the agricultural lot.
Right.
Dimitri, could you go back to that affordable housing and just run through that again?
Sure.
Because the impression I got, if you're sitting in a group of $1 million homes, one at 900,000 is affordable.
Yeah, that's basically, I think that's the issue here, because now what is happening is that the idea of affordable housing is starting to no longer be tied to the income of the occupant, but rather being tied to the surrounding area, the market value of the surrounding area. I mean, the way that I've seen it in the past is that typically, in that type of structure, affordable housing would be defined as something that's like 80% of surrounding market value. And yeah, when you're surrounded by in a neighborhood or an area with $1 million homes, 800,000 would technically meet the definition of affordable housing or housing that's more affordable, but it's certainly not affordable to those that are below median levels of income. So I'm going to move on to the changes that are proposed by Bill 97 to the Planning Act. There are a number of changes to different legislations and statutes, but I've only highlighted those that are relevant to the Planning Act. And one of the most, significant changes is reinstating site plan control for residential developments that contain 10 or fewer residential units within a prescribed area. So if we remember in Bill 23 essentially removed site plan control from these types of developments. Now, Bill 97 is looking to bring that back to a prescribed area. And one of those prescribed areas is within 120 meters or about 395 feet of a water body. And so the province is seeking comments on that as well. So I think that's something that is relevant to municipalities that contain a lot of waterfront development, and it's something that this our department does support. So I think this is a good backtrack, but we'll see how the province receives those comments, and we'll see where that takes us.
Is this a spot that we could ask them to backtrack about conservation authorities as well?
I wish we could do that, but I think, you know what, I think you brought up a good point here that I think I wanted to touch up on. And that's natural heritage. So the provincial policy statement does not contain any natural heritage policies. That whole section has been essentially put on hold for the time being. And right now, the province is basically saying that they are reviewing natural heritage policies and that those natural heritage policies will be addressed through a separate ERO posting, even though they are normally included in the PPS. So when you look at the new provincial planning statement, the natural heritage section is completely blank, except with the excluding a little paragraph that says these policies are still under review. So even though a new provincial planning statement is going to be coming in into effect sometime in the fall, that's what we're estimating at least. We still don't know what the natural heritage policies are going to look like in that statement. So I'm anticipating that we'll bring another presentation and another information report once those policies are put out to comment through an ERO posting.
So I know I'm going to be a little cynical here, but we are May. They're going to bring this in the fall, and they're actually going to listen to our comments and change it and probably have some comments or some back and forth dialogue to why the changes you're saying that could happen.
In terms of natural heritage or the general, the process typically is they ask for comments on the ERO, the registry, and then they receive those comments, and then decisions are made, and then those policies are brought forward. I'm not sure if there's going to be a lot of back and forth. There may be, but I think this is our only really opportunity to submit some comments regarding the changes to the PPS. So the second change to the Planning Act is related to the application timeline and fee refund, which was brought forward by Bill 109. So when Bill 109 was brought forward initially, they had suspended the effective date, but now through Bill 97, that effective date is going to be July 1st, 2023. And I'm sure you could recall Sonia had worked with each individual council to come up with official plan amendments as well as policies that now speak to what constitutes a complete application to make sure we're meeting our obligations under this new application timeline and fee refund provision. The other change revolves around ministerial power. So the minister has given themselves more power to create policies through ministerial zoning orders or MZOs, and the change now allows the minister to make regulations and other orders related to planning functions within a municipality that was previously directed by the local municipality. So these may include imposing more restrictions or limits or conditions of powers, to regulate demolition and conversion of residential and rental properties, prescribe requirements that are contained in bylaws for certain things, prescribe conditions that must be included in requirements for obtaining a permit, and prescribe requirements that the municipality must impose on owners of land. There's also been some more clarification regarding parking, and that no more than one unit, no more than one parking spot can be required per each primary residential unit within an official plan or zoning bylaw. And the other change is also.
Gary, go ahead.
To comment on that, many years ago, City of Waterloo did a large subdivision. One parking space per resident or per house. And 5 years later, all the front lawns were paved and they had major runoff issues with their stormwater system. Because there was no grass to hold it. It's just a comment.
Oh, absolutely. I can comment on that too. I lived in a unit where that was approved with similar type of under the similar type of policies, and the residential streets were essentially paved with like parked cars all over the place. So a lot of the subdivisions were not designed with a lot of parking in mind. So this may be a good change, but this may have an impact on existing stable neighborhoods.
Judy?
I can confirm that in Waterloo, there was also that parking lot issue along the residential streets that actually resulted in the burning down of a home because the fire department could not navigate the street.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's, I think that really reflects my comment regarding stable neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods that have been around for a long time.
Probably some of it is though they want to address more vehicles. Right? Could be some to do with those subdivisions. They want to limit it to one vehicle because then that way that would force people to use transit.
You know, in the country, you need two vehicles if two people are going to work because they're probably going in opposite directions. So maybe
But
this
I'm-
is something we need to comment on.
In terms of residential development, parking does take up quite a bit of space, especially in a dense urban area. I'm not sure if in the rural area it's going to be as significant. We don't typically require a specific amount of parking space on a residential development because the rural lots are so large. This may have a little bit more implication in areas such as Marysville, where and other hamlets where density is much tighter.
What about for short-term rentals?
Nothing regarding short-term rentals
No,
on
in
this.
regards to parking that, because if you have a building that hosts 6 different families that
Mhm.
could rent a large short-term rental, are we saying one parking spot?
I'm not sure. This is something we might have to look at. There may be ways to implement more parking provisions through licensing, but I don't, that's something we would need to look at, but I think you bring up a good point. So I'll just move on. Another change by Bill 97 is related to appeal rights to OP policies and zoning bylaws that authorize a detached accessory structure. So currently the Planning Act does not allow for appeals in the case of a detached residential structure on a parcel that already has a dwelling on it in areas that are located within parcels of urban residential land. So that's been struck out, and now it permits and now it restricts those appeal rights to essentially any parcel of land. So what this means is that a township or an applicant or a property owner has the ability to amend official plan policies or zoning bylaws to permit detached residential units on all rural lands without the risk of appeal rights, essentially, without somebody appealing that application. But this, what I note in the report is that it's unclear if these provisions apply to waterfront lots or if the intention to reinstate site plan control in waterfront areas is intended to manage accessory dwelling units on the waterfront lot. But part of this is why one of the comments that we are hoping to submit to the ERO specifically asks the province to consider impact on additional residential units in waterfront areas, because they should not be treated the same as an inland parcel, given the sensitivity of those lands and the importance of lakes in the county. There's, I think that basically concludes the report. There's going to be no financial implications at this time. We're going to continue working with we're going to be working with all the townships as these changes come forward, and we'll be speaking to each individual council, each township council regarding these changes and how they may impact them. We're also going to be working on trying to seek more clarity from both the province with our municipal partners from other jurisdictions in the province.
Ron?
So this is all geared for individual lot creation, has nothing to do with subdivisions, and that's still all under a different criteria, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So, yeah, exactly.
Dimitri, does this mean we need to review all of our existing OPs and zoning bylaws to see how they fit into the new rules, or are they grandfathered?
So the way that the implementation criteria currently states is that once this new provincial planning statement comes into effect, it overrides any existing zoning bylaws or official plans. But I mean, that's pretty normal and you would need to update them regardless. But as far as Central and North Frontenac, there won't be too many changes given that you don't have any prime agricultural lands or employment lands. So not too many changes will be required on in your townships. But certainly South Frontenac and Frontenac Islands may require changes to their policies.
Okay. Jerry,
You're on the agenda for all the townships too, right?
I am. I'll be there. I'll be
Being
there on
Friday.
Friday. Yeah, I'll be there on Friday.
Thank you.
to do this again.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Dimitri? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll be talking about this for many months to come.
I'm sure there'll be more to come as well. Thank you.
Yes. Sure, sure. We have a motion.
So moved by Councillor Lichty, seconded by Councillor Greenwood Spears, be it resolved that council receives for information the administrative report entitled Summary of Proposed Changes to the Provincial Policy Statement and Planning Act, Bill 97, and that council direct the clerk to submit comments about the proposed changes as outlined in Appendix A of this report to the province through the Environmental Registry of Ontario.
Any further comments? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Next, acquisition of the MVCA owned portions of the KMP Trail.
Moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Gowdy, be it resolved that the warden and clerk be authorized to enter into an agreement of purchase and sale with the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority for the Frontenac County portion of the KMP Trail section for $1 with a free and clear title, and further that the county clerk is hereby further authorized to execute all closing documents as may be required in order to complete the subject transaction and to do all other things as may be reasonably be required to close and complete the foregoing transaction.
Any discussion? Fred?
So regarding the well, with a free and clear title, what does that mean?
Yes, go ahead, Kelly.
So with all of the railroad lands, there's been a number of different land transactions. So what's free and clear is what the two lawyers agree and that the land registry office agrees is clear title. So I know that, south of Charlotte Lake, there were a number of issues, and on this parcel, there are a number of issues. But essentially that'll be determined by what the two lawyers representing the Conservation Authority and the county and the land registry office. Ultimately, the land registry office is the final determination.
Just one more. Now, on the map, we have two areas that are contested. And does this motion include those lands?
Yes, it does. And those lands, that's what will be determined by the two lawyers in the land registry office. The county won't be making that determination. The lawyers and the registry office will agree.
That include representation from the landowners that are in dispute?
So, for example, if your property at the land registry office is registered in your name, no problems. If it's registered in your neighbor's name, the land registry office is always right until you prove them wrong. So it's up to the landowner property to disagree. And I understand that at least one of those cases, the landowner has taken the case and has lost or has appealed and has lost. So it is the landowner's responsibility, but it is ultimately determined by the land registry office, not by the county.
So,
Yeah,
so the
just,
title will
yeah.
determine.
Never mind it. I think it's up to the landowner to. And I know, I suspect there's one of those properties where Mississippi Valley had admitted that that landowner actually owns it.
Okay.
And the opinion of the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority isn't relevant. It's what the Land Registry Office determines.
Judy?
Just a quick clarification, aside from the $1, which I'm pretty sure we could afford, does it also mean that we're taking on the cost of $527,915 to rehabilitate that area? And if so, how much? It says we're going to be using federal gas tax, which is Canada Community Building Fund now. Is that already covered in our budget for that much money?
So in the financial section, yes, but ultimately it'll be part of Richard's business plan going forward. So you will see that again in terms of the actual construction once the land is purchased and if the land is purchased. But that is the intent of that money.
Okay, Fred, one more?
This particular part of the trail starts at the east side of the 509. Continues north through Wilbur up to South Levant Road thereabouts. Is that correct?
Richard knows the lay of the land better than I do, but I believe the answer is yes.
Thereabouts would be correct through you, Deputy Ward.
Okay. Okay. All those in favor of buying this property? Oh, do you have a question? No? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, we are now at our consultant briefing from Lori Huber from KPMG with where the county position is financially. Welcome, Lori.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here before you. I will keep my remarks brief because it really was another year of a clean audit for the county for the fiscal year ended December 31, 2022. In your package, management have provided you a fairly detailed overview of the highlights in terms of the numbers and the financial statements themselves. So here this morning, I thought it would be wise to stick to my responsibilities, which is with respect to the external audit. So I have put together some highlights. So in terms of the status of the audit, we are essentially complete subject to the conversation here today and ultimately council's approval of the financial statements. Our draft audit report is our ultimate deliverable, which is included as part of your package in the financial statements. It is in draft subject again to approval by council, but it is a standard audit report. It is what a clean audit report does look like in Canada. The very first paragraph that you will see in the financial statements, it states, in our opinion, we believe the financial statements do present fairly in all material respects the financial activities of the county for the year ended December 31, 2022. The report does carry on and speak to management's responsibilities with respect to the financial statements, along with your own being those charged with governance, and of course, our responsibilities as your external auditor. Subject to approval here today, we will be in a position to be able to date our report today and subsequently release in final. So in terms of the findings, again, the audit was very well done on the part of management, had their full cooperation and really no significant findings. We completed our audit in accordance with our audit plan. A KPMG audit approach continues to be a risk-based approach, which means we stand back, look at the financial statements as a whole, try to identify where we believe there's a greater risk of material misstatement occurring, and certainly adopting an audit plan in accordance with that. We do audit a number of municipalities, certainly in this region, and certainly we do see a lot of similarities and certainly adopt our audit plan for any uniqueness that we see in your accounts. In terms of the numbers themselves, included in the financial statements are items that we have highlighted through the course of our audit. Any items that we have identified through the course of our findings as we're working through the detailed accounts, have conversations with the team, and they ultimately land in the financial statements, assuming they are not material. So materiality is an audit concept that is important. It really sets the stage in terms of the quantity and the volume of the work that we do look at. We had set materiality on the financial statements as a whole at 500,000 this year, which is a common percentage, usually around 3% of your gross revenues or expenditures in any given year. We did identify one amount this year related to an uncorrected item, so it's not included in the financial statements. It's less than the 500,000, so it has not been recorded, which enables us to still be able to release a final opinion that is clean, relating to donations that have been received in previous years that are sitting in your accumulated surplus, compared to where they should be on the balance sheet, just over 200,000. So certainly not significant. In terms of what was new and different this year, from the accounting side of the house, there were no new accounting standards under which the county must report. I know at this venue last year, we certainly had lots of conversation of the accounting standards that are coming into the future. That future is actually fiscal 2023. The big one to keep on the horizon for financial reporting is asset retirement obligations. It will have an impact on the financial statements. And certainly speaking with the management team, they're very much aware of this new standard and certainly will be well positioned when the time comes to complete the 2023 year end. In terms of audit standards, that's the other side of the house that we need to be mindful of. There was a new audit standard this year that we were required to consider and to incorporate. It's a new audit standard around the auditor's assessment of risk. So our side of the house, not so much the way management prepare and account for items in the financial statements. So we've done that. It was a bit of a deeper dive in terms of our risk assessment, including matters related to IT as well compared to previous years. No significant findings were identified in that regard either. Final piece, as part of a financial statement audit, we are required to gain a significant understanding of the processes that culminate into the financial statements, particularly around the financial reporting process. So we've done that again this year, and there's certainly nothing from a control deficiency perspective to bring to your attention. So it really is a good news story for fiscal 2022. I've tried to keep my remarks brief, but I'd certainly welcome any questions from the group if there are any. Thank you.
Any questions, Judy?
Regarding the paramedic services, looks like it was over budgeted by 1.668. Yeah, 1.7 million, we'll call it, primarily related to WSIB. Is there any strategy you could recommend that we deal with this more effectively? And the other piece that caught my attention was transportation was over budget by 166,000. Again, with WSIB being cited. So what can we do?
So through you, Madam Chair, perhaps I can give the first cut of the answer and maybe I'll defer to Alex as well if you wanted to chime in. So the way the financial statements work, so the county is what we call a Schedule II employer, which is a self-insured entity related to WSIB. That requires the determination of an actuarial valuation to determine today what they think the cost will be based on historical practice and so on. So it's not necessarily a cash number, it's an accounting number that has been put on the books this year, which was significantly higher compared to the previous year, which is why you're seeing the expense on the statement of operations. I'm not so sure that you would actually budget for that amount because it's an estimate of future costs. So it's certainly not related to 1 year, related to cash payments. Without getting into a lot more detail, Alex, is there anything extra you might want to add in that regard?
No, I think at a high level, we did a pretty good job of covering it. It is more of a financial expense than an actual expense. And also with regards to paramedic services, a lot of it was also due to higher than expected call volumes, which we did address through the 2023 budget cycle.
So our deficit of $250,000 overall would not be including these estimated figures, or would it be including the estimated figures? So we might not be in as poor shape as we thought there.
So it would be including those figures. So, and we worked those into 2023 as well. That information came to light after 2022 budget was passed. So unfortunately, we're behind on that one. So we're a little behind the 8 ball. So given that, we had a pretty decent year.
Even though those numbers look bad, the biggest impact it would have on the county is our premium. Our costs for those insurances keep going up, right?
Well, we are self-insured on WSIB. So we do an actuarial calculation through an independent body. And when does that due, Alex? I'm over my head.
Yeah, so that next one will be based on the 2023 year. And it's not, without going too much in depth, if you're a Schedule I employer, you pay a percentage of salaries. The way we figured out, we also do a percentage of salaries, but that's to include our own liability as opposed to a Schedule I, which is basically based on the entire province's liability.
Okay, it's not simple math.
So is it still beneficial to be self-insured, or should we be looking at a pool?
That's something we are looking into at this point. Now, the downside is if you do decide to no longer be self-insured, you're still liable for everything that happened while you were self-insured. So then you're paying your Schedule 1 fee, and you may also have additional liability for Schedule 2 if you don't have reserve to back it up. But it is something we are looking into.
Okay. All right. So if there's no other questions or comments, we do have a motion.
Moved by Councillor Leonard, seconded by Councillor Fowler, resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac receive the Corporate Services 2022 Audited Financial Statements Report, and further that the Council of the County of Frontenac approve the 2022 Audited Financial Statements of the Corporation of the County of Frontenac. And finally, that the Council of the County of Frontenac approve the transfer of the year-end deficit of $251,677 from the stabilization reserve.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, Lori, and we'll see you next year. All right, information reports, corporate services, investment report, and the first quarter financial summary and outlook, and report from advisory committees. Our first one is the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee.
Moved by Councillor Lichty, seconded by Warden Vanderwall, that the report received from the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee be received and adopted.
Questions or comments? All those in favor? Carried. Okay.
Moved by Councillor Greenwood Spears, seconded by Councillor Saunders, that council revert from Committee of the Whole Council to Council.
Discussion, all those in favor? Carried. Can I work from the side?
Adoption of the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Moved by Councillor Gowdy, seconded by Councillor Leonard, that the report of the Committee of the Whole be adopted and that the necessary actions or bylaws be enacted.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Notices of motion which have been given.
So request for ATV access to the KMP south of Verona is moved by Councillor Leonard, seconded by Warden Vanderwall. Whereas Mr. Mark Moyes of the Verona ATV Club addressed council at its April 19th, 2023 meeting, requesting that the council allow ATV access to the KMP Trail south of Verona to Harrowsmith. Therefore, be resolved that council directs staff to prepare a report to the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee to address this request.
Questions? Comments? Yes, Councillor Lichty.
When I'm in favor of this, but when this report is done, especially for somebody like me who doesn't have the history, would there be, I would like to see the report include a reason as to why motorized access wasn't allowed previously. Whatever the reasoning was and what has changed since then, if anything.
Okay. Any other questions? I do have a comment. I received some phone calls about, we've heard why. We haven't heard from those why not. So when it goes to this committee, they would like the opportunity equally as the person that's pro ATV for the reasons why we shouldn't. So I think it's important that the date of that meeting be publicized so that they have the opportunity to speak to it also. Is that fair enough? Okay. Yes, Councillor Fowler.
Will we be holding a public meeting regarding this as well?
They can come, I think they can come to the planning advisory meeting, but I don't know if they have the opportunity to speak there, or do they have to ask to be a delegation?
They need to ask to be heard at the meeting.
Mr. Allen?
Assuming that this motion goes forward, we'll bring a report on next steps. We won't be recommending a decision at the committee meeting. We'll be laying out some recommendations in terms of public engagement and consultation as part of that report with next steps to move forward with that consideration for council. So people may register as delegations for that committee meeting, but we also will be providing other ways for people to provide their input into that decision for that committee to consider and go forward on over the summer.
So I guess my question to that is, after the committees had their say and the recommendations are coming, even though the public has a comment on it, would it not be a little more helpful to have some of those comments before the committee just makes their recommendation?
That could be possible. The next committee meeting is in a month. We could work with communications to do something online prior to that.
Okay, and if somebody wants to come to the meeting, they have to register. Deputy Warden Smith?
As the chair of that committee, I certainly would like to see those comments come forward ahead of time and be included in the staff's report, because we know it's a controversial issue. There will be a handful for and a handful against, and then the committee will have to be the bad guy making the decision and making one group not happy. So I think we have a petitioner out to open it. So I think we need to hear the other side as well. Ray?
Very good. Councillor Leonard?
Well, I definitely agree that we have to hear it from both sides of the fence here. But I think there should be a timeline on when they can or when they should come. So they don't prolong things all the way through the year, just to prolong no ATVs on the trail. Do you have any kind of a timeline?
Well, I've been waiting for direction from council to pursue this issue. So I don't have a timeline at this stage because I'm waiting for the direction to be provided through the motion.
And that planning advisory meeting is July, correct? So if we have that meeting in July, obviously, then we're still giving everybody an opportunity. So there would be a timeline of a 20 or 30-day appeal, whatever you want to call it, or commenting period. You might as well say that it's going to be for the fall or next year if it gets implemented. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think we would want both the committee and council to have time to consider, and we would want time to inform the public of any changes. So I would not recommend an immediate implementation, even if a decision is made by the committee and council this summer.
Perfect. Thank you. Any more discussion on that?
I think Jeanette has suggested that we do an amendment to the motion,
Okay,
because I think if we're going to be adding the public forum and getting comments, we need to have that all in the minutes.
very good.
Through you, your worship, just to clarify, the minutes do not capture note or comment. So if you want a record that you're asking staff to publicize this prior to the meeting, it really should be included in the recommendation.
Okay, so you already know, you just said what that was. Do we have a mover to include the public? Councillor Gowdy and Councillor Saunders. Seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion on that portion?
We need a time frame of when we expect comments back. Because again, it shouldn't be drug on too long. People have known this has been on the books as a notice of motion for a couple of months now. So I think we should expect people to send their comments quickly.
So in fairness, if we have the planning advisory meeting on the 6th, are we saying they have to have all their comments in by then? Or are we saying they have a time period after they know what all the discussion is? Would you like to comment on that, Mr. Allen, or no?
Guessing would walk through the process and become recommendation council, and also any recommendation of the advisory committee comes here, so they could essentially appear before the committee and also
No.
or whatever process.
So I guess On that note, then, if the ATVs put together all of their presentation and asked to do it, then they should be prepared to have that done too before that meeting. Is that fair enough? If the people who want to speak differently to it.
Yeah, they will have two opportunities.
Perfect. Then I don't think we need to put a time on it. That meeting's coming up on the 6th of July. They'll have the opportunity, and then if they want to be a delegation at council to still speak against it, they can at the next following meeting. Is that fair enough? Which would be September because no meeting in August.
I'm a little confused at this stage, but my initial intention was to bring forward a report of next steps about how we would engage the public about this issue to the July meeting. But what I'm hearing from council is that you'd like me to move faster in terms of that engagement and bring the public's response to that meeting in order to make a recommendation to council in July.
Well, in fairness, I think the public should also have a responsibility to bring their comments to that meeting so that the committee can hear it. If they didn't want to recommend one way or the other, they should hear both sides of it, shouldn't they? That's my opinion, Deputy Warden.
I think the how isn't that complicated. It could be by social media directly to us. It could be in emails to us. And it can be in person at the meeting. So those are pretty, a lot of options for people to give us their comments.
So I think it's fair to say we want those comments at that meeting, and then we will deal with the recommendation from the committee who has heard the comments at the next council meeting. Councillor Greenwood Spears.
Would it be warranted to have a special meeting maybe in June, just so that there's ample opportunity for them to have a dedicated meeting that the comments can then be summarized and brought to the next meeting?
Well, I see Mr. Allen is shaking his head. No, we didn't have a special meeting for the other side. He asked to do a presentation and they did. So that's why it's here. Pardon?
I meant a special meeting that would have involved both sides, and that because you said it's a very contentious issue, that it's a dedicated meeting so that both sides can make their comments and then have it summarized so that it can come before the advisory committee and be done.
The pros have already been here, and mixing the pros and the cons together is never a good idea. So
Not if I'm sharing.
well, if the ones who have concerns, one person is sitting here, he can do his homework and due diligence and have that to the committee by July 6th. If he wants to speak at July 6th, he can ask to be put on the agenda. Or he can ask to be put on the council meeting also. I think that gives them lots of opportunity. Okay. So as amended, did you? Okay,
I'm a bit lost now. Okay, so there is a motion to amend moved by Councillor Gowdy, seconded by Councillor Saunders, that the motion be amended to include opportunity for the public to provide comments prior to the report being presented to the Planning and Economic Development Advisory Committee. Is that correct? Is that what I?
prior to that meeting, Councillor Saunders.
So if I could we include the date of that meeting just for clarity?
I refer to Mr. Allen. Are you going to be ready to have the report ready for the July meeting?
It's possible. If I'm being directed to, then yes. Okay.
Okay, so I will add the July 5th.
Thank you.
Okay.
So directed.
Okay, any more discussion on that? All in favor? Carry. Then at this time, I'd ask the deputy warden.
Sorry, through you, Warden Vanderwall, you now have to
Okay, the
carry
original
the
motion.
motion as amended.
Okay, the original motion as amended. Any discussion? All in favor? Carry. This time I would ask the deputy warden to take the chair.
Okay, we are going to deal with the request that the province reconsider the current wording in Bill 23, More Homes Built Faster Act, and reinstate language to require conservation authorities to review and process applications within a legislated timeframe. Do you want to read the motion, Jeanette?
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Moved by Warden Vanderwall, seconded by Councillor Leonard, and through you, Madam Deputy Warden, if I can just go to the resolve clause, therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the County of Frontenac requests that the province consider the current wording of Bill 23 and that the ability to provide review and commenting services as part of the planning approval process on natural heritage and water-related policies be reinstated with the addition of language that would require conservation authorities to process applications within a legislated timeframe, and that the Council of the Corporation of the County of Frontenac direct the clerk to send this motion to the Premier of Ontario, the Ontario Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and the local members of provincial parliament.
Discussion. Judy?
A question that because Frontenac Islands isn't part of the Cataraqui Conservation Area and that given the geographical nature, does there need to be some sort of amendment added in that a municipality can delegate, has the authority to delegate to the Conservation Authority or suitable organization for approval?
What do you do now, Judy?
That's a good question. Usually the Conservation Authority has had comments, invited over for comments in the past, but we're not officially part of their area, and that because it's all land-based and we're island-based.
Yeah. Joe?
Through you, Deputy Warden, and to your question or your comment, Mayor Greenwood or Councillor Greenwood Spears. So in the last 5 years, we've had a contract working with Frontenac Islands Township with the CRCA to provide comments on natural heritage studies. However, it's Bill 23 has made it very clear that conservation areas are not even any longer permitted to have those contractual agreements with municipalities. They can't contract their services out as a consultant. So that they won't be able to help us on the islands anymore, even though they had been helping, even though there is no jurisdiction for them on the islands. Thank you.
Well, if I might elaborate a little also, this is the motion. However, there was more meat on the bone when we went to our MPP. And some of those was the rationale, some of it, why, what are we going to do with all the biologists that are there? And it only made sense that whichever conservation authority it was, that we could still ask them to do these things and all of those things, which he agreed with. So he has more context, but this is at least to get the discussion at the province to say, well, hold on. Why can't we do that? Or why shouldn't we? And then some of those members would speak to it.
Just to add to this, we believe that this is an Eastern Ontario problem. Doesn't affect Toronto, Hamilton, the big cities, but it certainly has a detriment effect on our municipalities and the whole of Eastern Ontario. We've got water all over the place and heritage all over the place. And we need our conservation authorities to be those people who are more realistic. They know the ground, they have a reasonable price, and we need them to get our job done.
And the whole history.
And the history. Okay, all those in favor of the motion? It's unanimous, carried. To you, Warden.
Is there anyone wanting to give notices of motion? Seeing none? Any interest or needing anything brought forward from communications? And there's 3 pages of it. I hope you've read them all. Any other business? Bylaws.
So through you, Warden Vandewaal, I have missed putting a bylaw in the package today. There should have been a bylaw listed for authorization to enter into an agreement of purchase and sale. So if that's okay, can we also add apart from the confirmatory bylaw, a bylaw to authorize the warden and clerk to enter into an agreement of purchase and sale? And this is through the resolution that council passed today in terms of the acquisition of the lands from the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority. So council did pass the resolution. I just missed putting the bylaw on the floor. So with council's permission,
So noted that you missed it,
yes.
because that doesn't happen very often.
So that is moved by Councillor Fowler and seconded by Councillor Lichty. Resolved that leave be given to the mover to introduce bylaws A and B that have been circulated to all members of County Council, and that bylaws A and B be read a first and second time.
And B is going to be.
And B is the motion to authorize the
Right.
purchase and sale.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Carry.
Moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Lichty, resolved that bylaws A and B be read a third time, signed, sealed, and finally passed.
Okay, if there are no more questions, all in favor? Carry.
Moved by Councillor Greenwood Spears, seconded by Deputy Warden Smith, that the meeting hereby adjourn at 11:15 a.m.
Anybody opposed? All in favor? Carry. Thank you.